First century Judaism didn't recognize the Messiah. Could the fact that they were a text-based religion who rejected living prophets have anything to do with that? Well, maybe. In the first century, Jesus laments, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee. How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." From the Christian perspective, here stands Jesus Christ, the long-awaited Messiah, and the Jews do not recognize him. Do not the Hebrew scriptures and the Hebrew prophets prophesy of and foretell the coming Messiah? Yet, here are the Jews, the Sadducees, the scribes, and the Pharisees, the leaders of the Jewish religion who know the Hebrew scriptures backwards and forwards and backwards. They know them like the back of their hand. And still, they don't recognize the most important and anticipated man and moment in the history of the world. Why? From the Jewish perspective, Jesus didn't meet the expectations of the expected Messiah. For example, the Messiah was expected to be a political king. Jesus was not. The Messiah was expected to restore the kingdom of Israel, the rebuilding of the Davidic monarchy, and national sovereignty. Jesus did not do those things. The Messiah was expected to bring universal peace. Jesus did not. The Messiah was expected to have a long, successful reign. Jesus was killed by the Romans at a young age. The Messiah was not expected to be divine or God incarnate. Jesus claimed divine sonship, a preexistence, and unity with the Father, which the Jews considered blasphemous. The Apostle Paul said, "But Israel, which followed after the law of righteousness, hath not attained to the law of righteousness. Wherefore? Because they sought it not by faith, but as it were by the works of the law. For they stumbled at the stumbling stone. As it is written, Behold, I lay in Sion a stumbling stone, a rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God." Ignorance. They didn't know. Why? By the first century, Judaism developed and evolved from over 400 years of no prophetic guidance while incorporating their own version of sola scriptura. According to according to Jewish and many Christian traditions, Malachi was the last of the Old Testament prophets. But what was the general spiritual state of Israel during the time of the last prophet? Israel's spiritual condition in Malachi was one of deep apathy, corruption, and covenant unfaithfulness. The Jews had returned from exile and rebuilt the temple, but their worship was hollow, their priests were corrupt, and their trust in God's justice had eroded. The exile was devastating to the Jewish religion. Before the exile, Jewish religion was temple and prophet centered. The Torah existed, but it wasn't the daily focus of ordinary Israelites. The Jewish corruption and covenant unfaithfulness continued during the exile. As far as a Jewish response to the prophets, the pattern is violent rejection before the exile and indifference or partial obedience after the exile, resulting in no prophets after Malachi. The written text, or the Torah, became the center of Jewish life during and after the exile. With the temple being destroyed, the Jews effectively moved themselves away from a prophet-centered religion into a text-centered religion. After Malachi, the already corrupt Jewish religion progresses 400 years in a state of apostasy without prophetic guidance, relying solely on their own interpretations of the written text. Of course, the first century Jews didn't recognize the Messiah. How could they? If the Jews had not rejected the prophets and embraced them faithfully, would they have recognized the Messiah? For Jesus said, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Take a religious group, once guided by a prophet who led and directed the people according to the will of God, a prophet who could right the wrongs and correct misunderstandings of doctrine, correct improper interpretations of Scripture, and a whole host of other things that man left alone can get himself into. Remove that prophet from the religious group and let them rely on their own interpretation of the written text for 400 years. And what does their very own God say about them 400 years later? "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how oft would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." If you're looking at a recipe on how to leave your house desolate, at least two ingredients are rejecting the prophets and relying on your own interpretation of written scripture. In no conceivable way is that a recipe for success. But finally, the Messiah comes, and before he leaves, he establishes once again those who are sent by God, prophets and apostles. But we know the sad story. These men are killed, and Christianity finds itself without prophets and apostles. In this post-apostolic era, Christians gather text they consider to be Scripture and form their own canon of Scripture. Christianity finds itself in the same situation as the post-prophetic era Judaism. Without the guidance of a living prophet and relying solely on their written text, what could possibly go wrong? How about centuries of friction over authority, doctrine, liturgy, and politics leading to the Great Schism of 1054, The Great Schism's fallout was enormous. It permanently split Christianity into the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, creating religious division, doctrinal divergence, political rivalries, and cultural separations. Although this group claimed apostolic succession, they were led by bishops, not apostles. These early bishops were successors in leadership, not apostolic, not apostleship, and that's significant. Even the prominent Bishop Ignatius of Antioch calls himself not an apostle, treating apostles as a higher category, and sees bishops as guardians of unity, not founders of doctrine. Even saying, "I do not command you as Peter and Paul did." Bishops couldn't. Why? Because they didn't have the same authority as the apostles. Even Clement of Rome never claimed bishops replace apostles. Now, fast forward another 460 years, and it gets worse. Christianity splits again. The Protestant Reformation. And since the Protestant Reformation, Christianity has just been a downhill, free-for-all race to as many different denominations and faith traditions we can possibly conceive. However many different biblical interpretations we can come up with, we'll need that many buildings for another startup church. I assure you, the Christianity we have today in no way represents the biblical blueprint. Now, therefore, ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth into an holy temple in the Lord. The church today, in neither composition or doctrinal unity, meets this biblical standard. I would say the old idiom applies here that Paul is rolling in his grave. Now, here we are again as Christians, once led by apostles and prophets who could correct wrong doctrines and settle the debates on proper interpretations of Scripture, to now actually rejecting the possibility of a modern prophet or apostle, saying we don't need them because we have the written word, and the written word is all we need. I assure you, many first century Jews said, apostles? We don't need apostles or prophets. We have the scriptures. What could possibly go wrong with that? According to many Christians today, we have no living prophets, and the ultimate authority on the earth is a written text, the Bible. Is this by divine design or an unfortunate result of something else? Well, the divine design, biblically speaking, has been living prophets and apostles who lead and direct his people, who also produce scripture. To insist on no living prophets or apostles and no more scripture is the result of falling into a state of apostasy. It didn't work out for the Jews, and so far it's been a wild ride for many Christians.